Hello, Rob here with Travels with Dottie. And I've been thinking, the past couple of days about a video concerning some legal issues with RVing and how it, I got such a large interest in that topic. So what I've been thinking about is you. Who are you? And what do you care about? And what are you looking for from me in my channel? And there's more than one answer here. I think that there's a group of people that are intrigued by the lifestyle that I'm living. Meaning I'm not just retired. I'm retired, and I do work a little bit, right? So I'm not 100% retired. I'd say I'm 90% retired. And I live on the road full time in a small trailer, and I've been doing it. In December of this year, I'll hit 4 years doing it, and I really enjoy it. And people are like, well, maybe that could be for me too. And I think there's another group of people that probably will never do it, but for one reason or another. And there's some people I know that have in the comments saying, I would do it, but I need to take care of my parents or my child, or I can't really leave where I am now. But in my heart, I'd love to. So I live through you. And those are people that really, really like the content of me going on on an errand run or going through the grocery store and taking you with me to do things that I want or need to do. And it's fun tagging along. And believe me, it's fun having you along with me. But today I thought I would address those of you out there that are maybe retired or close to retirement, or even younger people. There are not that many younger people on my channel, I can tell from the demographics. It's mostly over 60. So near retirement, retired, and thinking, is this a way for me to have a really great time in retirement? And what are the things that might prevent me from doing that? So that's what I did for today's video. I came up with 10 reasons why someone may be hesitant to do this lifestyle. So I think every single one of these things are very real concerns, and I'm going to talk about them one at a time and how I feel about each one of them and how I've myself personally mitigated the risk that are associated with them. So the first one is probably the most important one for many people. That's financial uncertainty. Unpredictable expenses. If you rent an apartment or buy a house or rent a house in a particular area, it may or may not be expensive for you, but it's predictable. It's unexpected expenses related to where you're living are fairly rare, and you can deal with that. If I say don't have a lease, don't stay anywhere permanently, and invest 5, 10, 15, 25, 30, 50, $100,000, whatever the number is that you're comfortable with, and invest in a house on wheels without any real plan of where you're going to stay and how much it's going to cost and whether or not you're going to be happy there, and how it's daunting. It's kind of scary. So what did I do in particular before I embarked? Well, a electronic spreadsheet was my friend. In the final 2 years of my full-time work, I tweaked my budgeting spreadsheet at least once a day. I'd get a break at work or a lunch, and I would bring up the spreadsheet, and I'd be doing research and asking people questions. And I had here's a column for this is the cheapest it could be in a month, and another column is this is the most expensive it could possibly be, and then there's stuff in the middle, and I just had all these scenarios going. And I spent hours and hours and hours, if you add it all up over those last 2 years, tweaking that budgeting electronic spreadsheet. It was an Excel spreadsheet. And the funniest thing about it is that starting the day I hit the road, I never really looked at it again. I didn't start making comparisons to see, well, there's probably one or two times out of curiosity I went back and said, I wonder how close this month is to, one of the scenarios that I had on that spreadsheet. So I still have the spreadsheet, but I certainly don't use it. Because I found out pretty quickly when the more and more educated I got about what other real people that I knew were doing in terms of where they were staying and how much they were paying for it, et cetera, the more confident I became about, hey, I can have backup plans for my backup plans. I can choose to stay in a luxury RV resort for $1,000 a month, or I can stay on BLM land for free, depending on the time of year and what my inclinations are. And so I became comfortable pretty quickly. But the number one thing was that spreadsheet. And, maybe that's not your thing. Maybe you need to do it by hand. I don't know. But that planning and research really relieved a lot of my fear about finances. Number two is healthcare access. And as we get older, we're going into retirement, our need for healthcare is only going to increase. And when I first retired, I was 62. Well, actually, I was 61. 61 in 10 months, 61 in 9 months, I think. So I was not eligible for Medicare. I could not afford to maintain the insurance I had at work through the Cobra plan. It was like $1,000 a month or something ridiculous like that. So I couldn't do that. And my income went down very quickly. And so what was my income? My income was, I started collecting Social Security a month or two after I turned 65. And I was able to earn, I think at that time it was, I think $18,000 or $19,000 a year working, so it wouldn't be affected. So I went pretty close to the max. So let's just round numbers, call it $20,000. So I made $20,000 a year working on the road, plus my Social Security, and that was what I had to work with. That's changed since then, and I'll talk more about that later. But what I needed to do and what I was able to do was the Affordable Care Act. I was able to get medical insurance, but here's what it protected me from were major medical expenses, because this was a high deductible policy. I think about $8,000. So my routine care I had to pay for out of pocket. So I had to pick and choose. And I'll tell you, one of the drawbacks of that, one of the ways I paid for that physically, was that when I was 63, 2 years before I turned 65, I started having pretty significant mobility problems that I was in denial over of those 2 years. A year and a half I was in denial over. Oh, my back's just tweaked. I'm just stiff. It's old age. And it steadily kept getting worse and worse and worse, to the point where I started seeking out-of-pocket medical help. So I went to a physical therapist, and in the first meeting they said, I had pain in my right leg, pretty severe pain in my thigh, on the top of my thigh, and I was using a cane by the time I sought treatment. And the physical therapist examined me and said, I know where you say the pain is, but the problem is your hip. And it's very likely severe arthritis. And what you really need is a hip replacement. And that was a shock to me. So when I got that information, I started doing research. I stuck with the physical therapy, and it didn't really help that much. And I went to a specialized massage therapist. That didn't help very much. And then I went to a chiropractor in town, and this is in Pahrump, Nevada. And he took x-rays, and he verified. He said, look at this. I want you to look at your hip joint, compare the left to the right, and you could see how the right hip looked very different from the left. There was on the left, at the ball at the top of the bone that goes into the hip, say this, on the left it was surrounded by a nice even coating of white something that looked perfectly normal. On the right, there was none of that. And he said, this is your problem. It's severe arthritis in your right hip, and your physical therapist is right. You need a hip replacement. And I'm like, I can't afford it, right? I was terrified of how much it was going to cost me. And I've got to wait until I get Medicare. And at that point, it was at least a year away before I would get Medicare. And he said, I can help you. If you come to me frequently, I can keep the pain at bay. And he was true to his word. He kept the pain at bay by coming frequently to him, and I was able to ditch the cane for a long time. So healthcare access my solution became pay out of pocket where I can to take care of things. And I got lucky. I got something that wasn't going to kill me. And I was able to wait until I got Medicare, and I went ahead and the whole operation cost me out of pocket. I think the deductible for Part B was $258. And the rest was paid in full because I got a Medigap policy. It was not cheap, but I got a Plan F, and I got taken care of. And there's a whole other thing about if you're going to be a nomad and travel, be careful when you get Medicare of what other plan you select with that. And when you're tempted by these advantage plans that say it's $0 a month and a gym membership and dental and vision and all these wonderful things, keep in mind that many of them will restrict you to where your legal address is. And outside of that area, many things will be out of network, and it can cost a lot of money. Versus the more expensive, the Medigap, the Medicare Supplement plans, there's no geographic limit to it. So I'm not going to get into details about that, but I stayed away from the Advantage plans and went to the supplement plans because healthcare access is important to me because I'm freely moving from state to state. I spend time in Arizona. Right now, it's pretty much Arizona and New Mexico, so it's not as big a deal as it was. Where in the beginning, I was going up to Idaho, I was in Nevada, I was in I was in Utah, I was in a lot of different places. So also, you have to think about where I'm living as a nomad from moment to moment, and if something serious happens to me, how close is a medical facility that's appropriate for whatever it is that's happening to me, and how can I get there? If you're a nomad, you probably are going to love spending time and staying in places like me. I love to be in Eagle Nest, New Mexico, which is up in the mountains near the Colorado border, and it's almost in the middle of nowhere. It's very remote. And to get really serious definitive care, it's hours away by ambulance, and it would likely, if something serious happened, it would be a helicopter. So one of the things that I did to mitigate that concern was I bought air medical insurance. It's like $79 a month. And I think mine's called Air Medcare, but there are lots of them. And all you have to do is pay $79 a month. And if you're airlifted somewhere, you don't pay anything, provided the airlift service is in their network, and it's an easy thing to check. I'm going to be in Eagle Nest, put in the zip code there. Is the local provider in your network? They'll tell you on the website yes or no. So everywhere that I stay, whether it's southern New Mexico, Quartzsite, Arizona, or Eagle Nest, all those places are covered. So I don't need to worry about getting a huge bill that isn't completely covered by Medicare for airlifting me. So the other thing to consider too is if a lot of us decide after a while, I want a home base, I want a place that I can retreat to and stay for a long period of time, especially if I have physical problems and I need a place to be comfortable. Like, when I had the surgery, I needed a place to be comfortable, where there might be people around that could look out for me. I was recovering from surgery. I couldn't be pulling my trailer anywhere. So that's a reason many of us say, I want to get a home base. And if you get a home base, one of the things that you need to think about is, okay, how far a drive is it to a really good hospital? And where I am, it's a little over 2 hours. All right. So that's a little bit of a concern. I'd call that an inconvenience. When I was home, when I called my home Pahrump, Nevada, it was an hour drive. So I've doubled that by moving here, but I'm okay with that. The third thing is giving up what we perceive as stability. That's where I have an apartment or I have a home in a particular city or town. I have relationships with people, relationships in the community. I know where the drugstore is. I know the grocery store. I know my way around the grocery store. Everything feels familiar, and it gives me maybe a sense of security. And I'm afraid to lose that. Because when I pack up and I leave there and I go to an area that may be beautiful for me to stay, I don't have the connections to people. The grocery stores are unfamiliar. Everything is unfamiliar. And I don't feel a sense of belonging to that community. I did think about that. But where I came from is my adult life, mostly because of job hopping. I moved quite frequently in my life, and I started over in new communities over and over again. So that gave me the confidence that I can do that going from anywhere to anywhere. I had that confidence. Now, some people may not have that confidence, especially if you've been in just one or two communities in your life. And some people have been in one their whole life. So the whole idea of going someplace new and trying to feel that sense of comfort in a new community is scary. And I can't talk to you from the perspective of someone that's lived in one or two places their whole life, because that's not been my experience. What I can say is that it's not only been pretty seamless and easy for me to do it, I know many, many people in the lifestyle that I'm close to that have found the same thing that I found, that it's surprisingly easy to go from place to place. And eventually I feel part of the community here in southern New Mexico, and I've only been here 5 or 6 weeks. And Eagle Nest, I was there for a couple of months last summer. I felt part of that community, and I felt that sense of familiarity. And certainly in Quartzsite, this will be my 4th year going to Quartzsite in the winter. I absolutely feel comfortable and tied to that community. So I know it can be done, and it's not that scary. And I do know people that have that resume of, I've only lived in 1 or 2 places, and they've had the same seamless, positive experience that I've had. Now, the 4th one is, this is a big objection that sadly I can't really address with any kind of authority, and that's relationship strain. If you are a couple, and many of you are, the idea of sharing that small a space with someone, what might you have fear that could harm or even destroy your relationship? I'm saying, yeah, I think that it could. Yet, and the caveat here, buyer beware here, when I say there are lots of couples on YouTube showing their life on the road. And the caveat is they're mostly not going to show you the ugly stuff. Yet the fact that so many of them have stayed together for so many years doing their content speaks to the idea that those adjustments can be made and you can do that. The only suggestion I would have as a human being, and I'm also a mental health therapist, is do some dry runs. Rent an RV, spend a couple of weeks in the RV, and just see what it feels like. Because it's not like you have a house where you can go upstairs to another room and be away from the other person for several hours reading a book or doing your taxes or whatever you're going to do separately. There are ways to get apart, but then there's, you're boondocked in the middle of nowhere in a small rig and it's raining. No one's going anywhere. Everyone's staying in that closed little space. So that is the one thing on this list, relationship strain, that sadly I can't speak all that intelligently about. But the next one I can, that's maintenance and breakdowns. There's a legitimate fear, especially, let's say I decide I don't have a lot of money to get started in this, so I'm going to buy a much older pickup truck to pull a trailer, or a much older Class C or Class A RV. And what happens if I get on the road and I break down and they say, you need your engine rebuilt, or a new engine, or this isn't salvageable, or and you're looking at $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 that you don't have, and it's over in an instant. That's a legitimate fear to have. Now, that has not happened to me, but that has happened to friends. And I do have a close friend that has had to stay stationary for longer than they wanted to because of that. And they needed to find a way to sock some money away to fix their rig. So it does happen. And I wouldn't say it happens frequently, but here's the thing. The best advice that I was given by someone that's been doing this a long time before I made the leap was, the advice was, Rob, make sure you have plenty of money in a bank account that you're not going to use for anything other than that kind of emergency. And I was like, how much? And she said, well, it depends. It's an individual thing. And I decided the right number for me was $10,000. Now you're hearing them, they go, I can't, no, this means I don't have $10,000, so I can't do that. No. That's what I felt I could do in the light of my circumstances. Your circumstances may be $2,000. But think about this. Whatever money you spend on what you're going to live in, if you decide to do this, factor in having that reserve. So if you have $10,000 to spend on a rig, maybe consider not spending the whole $10,000 on the rig. Maybe spend $7,000 on a reused rig and putting aside $3,000 for things that may happen to that older rig, instead of just blowing the whole 10 on the rig and hoping it holds together and you don't have a disaster. One of the things that I do in my head is I've got a Ford truck and it's been very reliable. I bought it new in 2018. So it's 7 years old and I've never really had any kind of significant problem with it. It's a Ford F-150 with a V6, 3.5 EcoBoost. It's a great, reliable engine and truck. I've been blessed by that. And I have a Winnebago Micro Mini, a 21-foot travel trailer. So what I've said to myself, okay, let's say my refrigerator, my hot water heater, my furnace, and my air conditioner, all those mechanical things inside my trailer, I need to replace them all in a 12-month or 6-month period. I have the worst luck in the world. How much is that going to cost me? And I add that number up, including the cost of the equipment, and for most of those things, paying someone to take out the old one and put in the new one. I don't kid myself. And that number becomes my disaster number. And the comfort that gives to me is like, it's very unlikely that it's ever going to be that number, and it's certainly not going to be more than that number. So I create a idea internally that I'm not going to be surprised about if the worst case happens, because I've figured out what the worst case is. So that's that. The next one is, believe it or not, people are very concerned about this. Not as much these days as when I first started. When I first started, I was very concerned about lack of reliable internet because I wanted to do online work. I couldn't do it if I didn't have reliable internet. And at the time, there was no Starlink. And for those of you who don't know what Starlink is, it's high-speed satellite internet that you can get anywhere. Before that, we used to rely on cellular plans. And, if I got a little AT&T hotspot, it was great as long as I was parked and camping somewhere where there was a good signal. But that's not always going to be the case. So it can be a constant source of worry. If you can afford the $165 a month for the roaming or mobile Starlink, then you're good. And here's the good thing about that. You get that, you can pause. Here's a frugal way to do it. You pay $165 a month for the Starlink, and then you get a much less expensive little hotspot, little router with cellular that maybe you can get for $50 a month. And you're thinking, Rob, you're over $200 now. How are you saving money? Here's how you do that. You can pause the Starlink. So let's say I go to Eagle Nest and I turn on my little AT&T hotspot and it's a great connection, high speed, no problems. I go online and I can pause the billing and the service on my Starlink for the 3 months that I'm there, and I use the $50 a month AT&T thing. And if I can do that in many of the places I go, or even most, you can save money doing that. So think about that. There are more options, and as competition develops over the next few years, Starlink's not going to be the only game in town forever. Amazon has a product they've put up satellites and they've successfully tested it. They have to build out the infrastructure and get the satellites up. They'll do it. There's more than one company out there in this race to compete with Starlink. And when that competition happens, what happens with competition? Prices come down. There you go. So, safety and security. This is something that I've personally not spent any time before or after worrying about safety and security concerns. That's not going to be everyone. What can you do if you're concerned? Well, I won't go into giving all kinds of advice on this because there's lots of places on the internet to learn about security things you can do in RVs to get you to feel safe. But don't listen. I would urge you not to listen to rumors about how unsafe or crime-ridden a place is. If you go to Quartzsite, Arizona, in the winter, and you listen to people on social media, you'll find them talking about, oh, it's a den of crack abusers and homeless people and people robbing people right and left, and there's lots of crime. It's not true. How do I know it's not true? Because I can go on the same internet and look for reputable sources of crime reporting. And when a lot of social media people use these numbers to say, oh, I told you it was crime ridden, because if you look at the number of crimes committed in comparison to the population, it's quite high. However, the population year round is about 26 or 2,700 people. And the visitors coming through in the winter top 1 million people. And none of those people are counted in when they compare the number of crimes reported to population. And that's a problem in a lot of communities that have a ton of seasonal or tourist traffic. If you look at the number of people that experience crime that come through and stay there, it's minuscule. And the violent crime is almost non-existent. It happens occasionally. But in the 4 years I've been here, I've heard one story about what some people consider a violent crime. And what it was is a woman's out in the desert sleeping in her car, and there's in the middle of the night, there's like an ATV or something out there, people yelling and screaming, and somehow a rock either got kicked or thrown into her car. It broke the back window like a hatchback, and glass rained down on her, and her legs got cut, and she was terrified. That was the whole extent of it, though, and a big deal was made of it, and it should. It was a scary thing to have happen, but she got those cuts and abrasions treated the next day at the ER. They never really caught anybody, but in 4 years, that's the only reliable story that has a hint of violence in it in Quartzsite. So you can do research, and that kind of thing can create you feeling more comfortable. All right, the next one is legal and bureaucratic hurdles, which I basically did the video that prompted me to, sort of start this line of giving this kind of information out to my viewers was on domicile laws, residency laws, addresses, things of that nature. And it's complex, and it's too complex for me to address here. However, everyone that I know in this lifestyle has managed to make it work one way or the other. And some people that I know domicile in Arizona, some in Nevada, all sorts of states out here. There's lots of ways to skin that cat. And can it get complicated? Of course it can. But do your research, talk to other people that have done it, and once it's done, it's not something that you constantly worry about going forward. Now, it's not to say I haven't heard horror stories about people domiciling somewhere and having like a commercial mailbox as their address, and their insurance company contacting them, say, you don't have a physical address, we're going to cancel your policy. I don't know anyone personally that that's happened to, but I've heard secondhand plus stories about that happening, and I guess those things are possible. Those things have not happened to me. So do your research, talk to other people. It's not as fraught with problems as you would think. Complexity doesn't necessarily mean deal breaker or awful. It is complete because every state you go in, there's a different law. There's different sets of laws and rules, and it can get complicated. But there's another video that I have that talks about domicile, and you can view that video. I'm not the end all. Hopefully there may be. I haven't looked, but maybe there's a lawyer or two out there that talks about it from the standpoint of nomads. I'm not sure, but it would be better for a lawyer to be doing it than me, for sure. And that was number 8. Number 9 is fear of loneliness or isolation. I did consider this. And someone even asked me, I was soliciting, hey, ask me anything, questions for a video. And I didn't do that video because I only got like 3 people responding to it. So I can't do a video like that with 3 questions. But this was a question, do you ever feel isolated or lonely? And the answer is yes, I do. However, it's infrequent. And I can say with confidence, it's less frequent than it was in the years where I lived in permanent residences. Yeah, you heard me right. When I've lived in condominiums, homes, apartments, I would more frequently feel that sense of isolation and loneliness in those environments than here. Well, why is that? Well, because I usually camp around other people. Like an eagle nest. You're going to see me in Eagle Nest. Right now, I'm not so much at this moment, but later in a couple weeks, I'm going to be going up to Eagle Nest for the summer. And then in the fall or in the winter, I'll go to Quartzsite. You will see how I'm surrounded by people. So there's less opportunity to feel that sense of isolation and loneliness. And I honestly felt it more before I became a nomad. I hope that helps. And I think many, many people that I know feel the same way. And the last one, I don't worry about this, but some people do. Uncertainty about weather and national disasters, fear being caught in the storms and floods and wildfires, tornadoes and things like that. Those things do happen to RVers. Right? I can remember many of you know author Deborah Dickinson, and I remember a video from a couple of years ago where she was in a caravan with people. They were literally running from, I think they were in New Mexico, if I'm not right. Deborah, if you're on here, please comment and remind people where you were. But in the video, they were running from a fire. That's scary. That's scary stuff. That has not happened to me. And sometimes those things can happen quickly. So you really need to keep an ear to the ground where you're camping and be aware and be ready and have a plan. As Deborah would tell you, have a backup to your backups and be ready to go. It may be things will get shaken around and a couple things broken, but be prepared to throw your stuff in your rig and take off at a moment's notice, especially during fire, flood, tornado season, where most of the time you have plenty of notice to get out. And I just suggest that you use that notice to get out. And and let's compare that, like on the last one, to in a sticks and bricks. Well, and I'm in an apartment, I'm in a house, there's a tornado coming. I can leave, but I sure as heck can't take all my stuff in my house with me, unless it has wheels on it and a hitch, like mine does. I can get out and everything I care about is going to come with me. So I actually maybe can make the argument that I worry less about weather and natural disasters because I'm mobile. I'm not going to leave my home to run to safety and come back and find my home destroyed, because when I'm leaving with my home. So I hope I was right about who I'm talking to and the kinds of things that you want to hear, but I won't know until I see, one, how many people watch this video, and two, how long do they watch it? Right? Those are as a YouTuber, that's what the things that I look at. Not just how many people, how many views I get, but if it's a, I can't see how many minutes it is because I stopped it once. But if it's a 30-minute video and people only watch for 2 minutes, and there are a lot of views, but they only watch for 2 minutes on average, that's a failure. I don't care how many views that I have. That means people watched the content for 2 minutes and said, this is not for me. That's not good. If I have far less views, but people are at the 50%, like they watch 15 minutes, maybe 18 minutes, that's a victory. That's a victory for me. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this content, and let me know in the comments. Take care, and I'll see you tomorrow.